Hello everyone, I'm Geoff Hall, and we're here for another segment of Where in Westford Is It? And since Bob Spinozzi has now on to Cincinnati, we have Leslie Howard. Leslie, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I've lived in Westford here for over 10 years now, almost 14 I think, and I am the president of the Westford Historical Society.
Oh, and you come with a background in museum history and things such as that. Yeah.
Yep.
Great choice for a great choice for leading the Historical Society. We made great progress with that.
Yeah.
But like anything else, you know, I've learned an awful lot doing the show and the research that I've done. Let me ask you a question. Do you know where the stables are in Westford?
It seems like they might be over by the Gould farm, which I guess is now Good Pickin' Farm.
Yeah, okay. It's always going to be the Gould Pickin' Farm to me, having grown up and spent a lot of my childhood there. But I'm not talking about that stable.
Okay.
I'm talking about another stable, and I bet you've seen it, and there's a picture of it.
Oh, that looks like what I drive by bringing my daughter to school.
Okay. And so you know the location of it.
Over in Nab.
Yeah. In the back of that, you would see the Nab Country Club, okay, in the parking lot. In Mill City Auto Body, which is next to that.
Okay.
By the way, Mill City Auto Body used to be a laundromat back in the 1960s. Yeah. When we talk about Nabnasset, and Rich McLaughlin and I, and Rich is the foremost authority on Nabnasset by all means, there are two names that come to mind, and that would be the Edwardses and the Moores. That's why we had Edwards Beach and Moore Road, Moore Avenue, and all of that. But this stable was at one time part of what was known was George Moore's farm.
Okay.
Okay? But let's talk a little bit about what happened in Nabnasset.
Yeah.
Nabnasset's probably one of the most, I think, thrilling or exciting areas of town. We talk about the history. I mean, we had quarries in Graniteville and mills, a mill in Nabnasset, but we have what was known as Nabnasset Grove.
Oh, that sounds so luxurious.
Well, it was a destination point from 1859 up until 1935 when the land was finally sold off. The lake was used for boat tours and things such as that. But it was started by a gentleman by the name of Captain Oliver Wallace Woodward, 139 acres.
Wow.
And part of that, I believe he had a stable there that ran horses out.
Oh.
The land was purchased, the farm, in 1874 by George C. Moore at the time. So Moore, okay, decides to build a farm. There's already a farm there, a farmhouse. And so he builds what's known as Nabnasset Pond Farm. Nabnasset Pond Farm, which has a stable there also. That stable, same location. The barn, which later became known for its, you must know a little bit about some of the history back there. It's a Nab Country Club, but the little theater movement?
Right. The Lakeshore Theater.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the 1930s, 1934, I think, Frank Trask, who had been a former Westford school teacher, came and started a little theater there in the barn. And he had thought about developing more of this little theater movement that was taking hold across the country. And so he had some famous stars come. I believe Ethel Barrymore came, and they performed there, and they were housed at the J.C. Abbott House, which used to be in the center.
That's correct,
But now the house no longer exists, sadly. It was a beautiful house.
Yes, it was. The building itself, as you said, was owned by the Abbotts, and it was torn down, I think, in 1942, and there's a picture of it, you know, half of it being torn down. And you see, why would a mansion like this be torn down? But the little theater movement, as you said, you know, that it became a big attraction in the 1930s. Prior to that, though, Moore had this farm, okay? Moore had the farm. He ran the Nabnasset Grove, but Moore was a developer. He himself lived in Chelmsford, in North Chelmsford.
Yeah.
And as he was living in North Chelmsford, he built a farm where Rich McLaughlin lives. That was the farmhouse, okay? That was the farmhouse. And then the barn, which became the Nabnasset Country Club and where the Little Theater movement was.
Okay.
They had 1,000 people that they housed in that old barn.
Wow.
You can still see the foundation there today if you pull into the parking lot. So that barn was torn down around the 1950s. But I want to go back a little bit before that, because what happens to Moore, he passes away, the Schulzemeyers.
Oh.
Okay? And the Schulzemeyers, so they start selling off the land in and around the lake as campsites, which is becoming very popular in the 1930s. They set up what was known as the Lakeshore Theater. The Nabnasset Lake Country Club was started around 1936. You could get a whole day of golf for $1.25.
Wow.
So if you get there in the morning,
Yeah.
and then the Nab Inn, okay?
Okay.
The Nab Inn was Richie McLaughlin, which is where the McLaughlins lived.
Okay.
And when it was the Nabnasset Inn, and it was up until around the mid-1940s and in the 30s, they had, you know, the dinners there and things like that, and you could stay over as a guest. So it was really just out of this little area where people see there's an awful lot of history surrounding that, Leslie. So,
Yeah.
do you have any questions about it? Did you?
Well, what happened to the building? I heard that there may have been a fire of some sort.
Well, the building that was the original area, there were two buildings. There was a big one that was a barn that housed the Nabnasset Country Club and the theater, and there was a smaller one in back that was kind of known as the Little Theater. The big one was torn down, we were told by George Fletcher, in the early 1950s, and moved over to Chelmsford, I think, over in the River Neck Road area, but I'm not really sure of that.
Okay.
The smaller one in the back became the Nab Country Club, and where the golf was out of. In March of 1977, that burnt.
Okay.
And had to be rebuilt. And at the time, my wife and I were living at the cottage, which was the dispatching office, and I helped dispatch that fire. Actually, my wife did most of it. Marilyn did most of it at the time. But you know, I remember the evening. Quite frankly, you know, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
And that burnt, and they've rebuilt it since. Of course, Nab Country Club is one of the features that we have today. So,
Yeah, that's great. I remember reading that one of the men who worked at the country club that night, he said he lost his car, his golf clubs, and his job all in one night. But come morning, he found out that wind had taken the fire away from his car, and his golf clubs were recovered, and that they still paid him, even though there wasn't a golf club. So I thought that was a fun little thing.
There's an awful lot. The Nabnasset Grove has a great deal of history to it, and there was more on that in the segment that Rich and I did on Nabnasset's history, but we hope to possibly do something specifically on Nabnasset Grove in the future.
Yeah.
But Leslie, thanks for being here.
Sure, this was fun.
Okay. Hope to see you next time.